So we have a Joint Judiciary Committee meeting coming up in next month, actually a few weeks from now, May 12th and 13th in Rawlins. And the Judiciary Committee will be considering a presentation from the ACLU on a model drone restriction bill. I've been doing some research myself and preparing a paper, and hopefully we'll also be testifying on the topic as well. So I was very happy that they are considered it as an interim topic along with civil forfeiture, which we've discussed previously. So there's a lot of things on their plate, but hopefully we will get something hopefully prepared as a committee bill going forward, and we can join the 10 states already. Just a few in the last three states within the last month have now signed bills into law, so now we're up to 10 states that have some restrictions on law enforcement use of drones.
Okay, now first thing that this brings to mind is, do you feel a little funny working with, or at least on the same track as the ACLU?
You know, Glenn, on the criminal law issues, I tend to be pretty well aligned with the ACLU.
Okay.
On First Amendment issues, the ACLU provided some very strong case law back in the day. They've started to really waffle on campaign finance, and I'll continue to rib them for that. It's unfortunate because they used to be very strong in that area, but their membership have become a little too reform-minded, quote unquote, which means they support red tape and all sorts of things that might as well be censorship. So I'm certainly not a member of the ACLU for a lot of other reasons, but on this topic, on criminal procedure, they're pretty strong.
Okay, I'm talking with Steve Klein from Wyoming Liberty Group, and since we're talking about drones on this issue, and you said there's about, what, 8 states out there that, did you say, have already passed something?
Yeah, most states have actually considered, the vast majority of states have considered some type of restriction, and now we're up to 10, including our neighbors Montana, Utah, and Idaho, that have requirements. And basically, what we're looking at is a bill that will hopefully require law enforcement to go and get a warrant before they use drones to either observe specific people or to look over private property. Right now, we have, a Fourth Amendment in the Constitution that protects privacy as far as our homes, our persons, our effects, and that case law is fairly strong. But years ago, already in the 1980s, there were cases where the court looked at planes. The police were using manned airplanes to fly over houses, and they were seeing marijuana patches in people's backyards and things like that. And the court said, well, you can't really restrict law enforcement in this way because commercial planes fly over people's homes all the time. You don't really have a reasonable expectation of privacy in your backyard when the world can see it. And of course, there are a lot of things going on in the private sector with drones and even with Google Maps and things like that. And those are serious considerations, but they're a lot tougher to tackle with public policy. On the other hand, the private sector so far can't put you in jail. So at least getting off on the right foot and getting a more extensive protection of liberty, because the law enforcement themselves in this past legislative session, they really like comparing planes to drones, but drones are becoming far more cheap to own, to operate. They're becoming smaller, and they're becoming vastly more efficient and, of course, more advanced with the ambient cameras that are attached to them and things of that nature. So I think we can and we should, under state law, expand the protections that we recognize. It may not be recognized under constitutional law, but that doesn't mean we can not pass laws that enhance our liberty.
There's so many questions to ask on this one because it really is breaking new ground on it. And for those just joining me, I'm talking with Steve Klein from Wyoming Liberty Group about drone and what's being written up as drone law. So, okay, let's say we pass something for local law enforcement. Does that have any effect on the EPA or the BLM or any of those agencies? Do they have to comply with the same kind of law that Wyoming would write?
Well, the trouble with environmental work and things of that nature, I mean, if they're pursuing any type of criminal investigation, then hopefully we would be able to restrict that. It's going to be tough. Again, you're dealing with federalism issues and other things. It would most likely best be pursued at the federal level, in my opinion. There's plenty of nullificationists who would disagree with me on that, but that's pretty much where I stand. The good news is a lot of the things they do with drones don't involve investigations for criminal activity, and we can hopefully curtail using drones, even private drones, to gather evidence and then pursue law. So that's the idea. I mean, you have to look at what a warrant, what it does. It doesn't prevent them, anyone from, it's not a preemptive thing against police, at least under the way of the law. The idea is that then if you're brought into criminal court and that evidence is presented and there was no warrant for it, then that evidence cannot be brought in court. It's as if it doesn't even exist. So you'd like to see that, even people are rightfully understand that the Fourth Amendment isn't always a cure-all. There will still be abuses by police. The question is what we can do afterward. Of course, there's been, a lot of heated things about this issue. You may have seen this past week, I believe, there's a candidate for Senate up in Montana, and he put out an interesting YouTube video commercial of him shooting down a drone. Interestingly, our neighbor Colorado, as far as I could tell, has not even considered at the state level any kind of drone restriction. However, there was a local town in Colorado that was for a time issuing drone hunting permits. So I think that goes to show the reaction that there is at the public level, and I certainly think you can expect that where we've seen so far too is a lot of the local law enforcement, when they are using drones, they're borrowing them from the federal government, and that mostly happens in the border states because Customs and Border Protection has been using modified Predator drones since 2004, and those are of course the multi-million-dollar super advanced drones. But now, just the other day in North Dakota, another state that has not considered drone restrictions, the Federal Aviation Administration approved one of 6 drone testing facilities. So they're going to be testing out the Dragon Flyer and see where it goes from there. So I think it's very important that we get out. We still have a chance to get out ahead of this, because the most important thing is the Federal Aviation Administration has not given blanket approval for the use of drones yet, because the federal government also has control over a lot of our airspace. So that's the big step, is before that happens, we should get out ahead of it.
No, I agree, and I did interview that gentleman from Montana as soon as I saw that video, and he was a hoot to talk to. I think, let me just go back real quick to what I was talking about with the federal government is, let's say here in Wyoming, you have Wyoming ranch land on Wyoming County property, but let's say the EPA, and they've been up to a lot lately, let's face it, in some states I've read some stories where they have flown over people's property with a drone. So that would be not a state issue, but a federal issue, you're saying? Or whose jurisdiction is that?
I think we could certainly, it's going to fall probably under federal jurisdiction. I think we can certainly fight back politically. And the good news is that the backlash, for what it's worth, has been fairly strong within the federal system as well. The trouble is that the Federal Aviation Administration, their only concern is safety. That's what the holdup has been, is that they want drones, when they're finally approved, model by model here, to be used safely and not to be crashing into houses and things like that, which is understandable. They didn't really understand the privacy implications, and they're really not in a position, I tend to agree, that they're not really in a position to make those determinations and set up the regulations in question. However, last fall, the Department of Justice did an internal review and has been, at least as far as it goes, putting privacy protections in place. It looks like the FBI and the ATF at least have told the Inspector General within the Department of Justice that they're going to be at least very careful and try and pursue warrants when they use. As far as the EPA, as far as, especially when if they're going over private land, I think, again, we need to be using the political power that we have, like we're still seeing in the Andrew Johnson case on the other side of Wyoming, over there near Fort Bridger. That's what you have to be really using. And it was our own Representative Cynthia Lummis who did co-sponsor one of the federal bills that would have also restricted drone use by federal agencies. So we need to keep that pressure on and work within the system. And, it's just that easy. It's just that hard.
Yeah, well, I think the good news is, and I'm not kidding, I'm very serious about this, big advantage we have out here in Wyoming and Dakotas and Montana. The wind is so bad, and most of these drones are so small, you can't launch them most of the year, so there's a plus there. Okay, next question is the legislation that Wyoming is taking a look at right now. in most cases it mirrors what other states have already passed? Are we looking to, again, grab a piece of legislation like that and mirror it so it's more uniform, or are we going to try for something unique?
You know, Glenn, actually the good news is that this legislation differs in a lot of ways, and in a lot of good ways. Most of the states that have passed really focused on the warrant requirement, and that's good because it prevents the ever-present eyes in the sky, the surveillance state, you know, just let's keep a drone up in the air all day long and see what it sees, you know. But they didn't go the extra step and implement data retention policies, and that's where things get pretty dicey, is that okay, even if you use a drone and you have a warrant, you need to look through what you've gathered, the data that you've gathered, and if it's not relevant, you need to get rid of it. You need to delete it. So only keep the stuff that is actually related to what the warrant said you could look for, because of course, putting a drone up in the sky, you're going to come across, see a lot of things through that lens that have nothing to do with what the warrant says you're supposed to be searching. So that's a really a good requirement that's in this model legislation that I really like. Another extra area, and this is an area that also ties into civil forfeiture, is we need better government reporting requirements. We need a one-stop shop where Wyomingites can go, hopefully online, to know what agencies have drones, how often they're using them, what they're using them for, and that's an area where we could really go beyond law enforcement too, and talk about game and fish, or you know, any of our other numerous agencies that might have an interest in using them. So those are two big things. And of course, I you know, hesitate on the reporting requirement because I'm going to be particularly critical of the fact that we have reporting requirements under our civil forfeiture law, and local police agencies in the Attorney General's office have been dismal in providing those reports because they've never actually compiled them, and we've had that law in the books for over 50 years.
Oh, interesting. And I wonder, as you've experienced the last time you were on this program, when you do ask for a report, how much of the report do you actually get? Because I remember you showing me that page. You know what got me about that page was they didn't even bother to use a magic marker. That would have been too much work. They just wrote redacted. I mean, that's getting pretty lazy as far as I'm concerned. Okay, now the other one I just saw an article posted up there from you, which had to do, in fact, if you go to my reading assignment page at boldrepublic.com today, Steve, you are the featured article. Government Truth Commission makes politics dirtier. What is your article about?
Well, you can check that out at yliberty.org, and basically we had a case argued on Tuesday.
What?
I'm sorry?
At boldrepublic.com. I mean, it's at my website right now. Well, if you want to go to yours, I'm sure. But anyway, go ahead.
Well, there was a case argued this week in the United States Supreme Court, the Susan B. Anthony list versus Dry House. And this is a case out of Ohio where the Susan B. Anthony list had told the candidate Steve Dryhouse they wanted to take out a billboard that said that he had voted for taxpayer-funded abortions, and that was his vote for Obamacare. Ohio is one of several states that maintains a false campaign speech law, and Dryhouse, rather than engaging in public debate and saying, no, that's not true, or engaging in any kind of debate at all, just went over to the Truth Commission at the Ohio Elections Commission and reported them for false campaign speech. The Susan B. Anthony list sued, and the case has now gone through the courts and is at the Supreme Court. And it looks like one way or the other. I mean, this is a rare instance where if you look at the oral argument, it looks like all 9 justices are pretty skeptical of the idea that government can play truth commission. And I was very happy that Justice Scalia was even using the Ministry of Truth language, because I've used that before in our campaign finance cases, ministries of information. So the idea is, it's very funny that this is one of those things that is clearly meant to clean up politics, but it really doesn't. Like so many election laws, so many types of laws like this, what they do is in fact inject law and make politics even dirtier. What was really fascinating is about half a year ago, a case out of Florida brought by a sister think tank of ours. They actually had a representative from the Florida Secretary of State, and they asked him about campaign finance laws that were in question in that case, and he said that something around 95% of complaints that were filed with his office were politically motivated. So it's very seldom about, oh, some altruistic, I'm going to make politics clean, but it's all too often about, I have a legal mechanism now to hurt my opponent. And who gets hurt most often are not the incumbents who have lawyers and have experienced campaign staffers, but usually grassroots upstart candidates. And I compared, I decided to compare that here in Wyoming in my writing, talking about, well, if we had a truth commission, you can just imagine the kind of shenanigans that we could get involved in. My particular, smug and snark example was looking at Charlie Hardy, who's running for Democrat and has a heck of a fight against him to go up against Enzi, who's a well-funded and popular incumbent. But he has a video, a campaign video, where he's talking about run with Charlie. And I pointed out very glibly, and I stand by my glibness, that Charlie is almost 75 years old and he is not by any definition running. In fact, he's more of a shuffle, maybe a jog. But if he can run for Senate, but when you see him down there in the video by the rail yards here in Cheyenne, he is not actually running. So
Right.
is that glib? Is that snarky? Absolutely. Does that mean it wouldn't be something that some political operative would try and tie up his campaign with? Absolutely not. That's something that, of course, anyone would jump on that, and they could jump on any other number of things. And instead of debating the issues in a big and open free marketplace of ideas, we would have the government playing truth commission. So it's far worse, and really the irony of these laws that are supposed to make politics so much cleaner end up making it the most dirtiest and shutting out the most people.
Well, and what's really happening with that gentleman is the Wyoming gale force winds are at his back and sort of pushing him down the street. That's so okay. Oh, by the way, go to my website. Not only is on my boldrepublic.com, not just my reading assignment page with your article there, but further down below your article, there I just got done spending about a half hour last hour talking about the Department of Homeland Security, and I likened it to. Have you heard about this? Who is supposed to be watching the Watchmen? The guy who was supposed to be looking for corruption in the Department of Homeland Security, in fact, was hiding any corruption that he found just so he can get bonuses and promotions and move his career up. And to me, this sounds like exactly, it sort of ties in with what your article was talking about, but more on the federal level, I would think. So, okay, where can people find your article and more besides my website?
Well, yeah, check it out. We have a lot going on at YLiberty, WYLIBERTY.org. Again, with coming up, if you want interested in the drone issue, that'll be a Judiciary Committee meeting in Rawlins, May 12th to 13th. As you mentioned, Glenn, we'll be at the Education Committee tomorrow. Encourage, of course, local people to turn out and make their opinions on Common Core or any other education issues known. So a lot going on as the summer season approaches.
All right. Thanks for coming on, Steve. Good to see you again.